Before we get started, don't forget to check out our new channel, Visual Academy. I think you might like it.
Route to the east by conquering Egypt and Syria.
On this channel, we cover a lot of historical topics. I'll leave you the link in the description. But now, let's get into today's video. As we've told you in previous videos, on the 30th of June 2020, everything changed in Hong Kong. On that day, a Tuesday that will go down in history as a sad day for democracy, the Chinese Communist Party ended the model once and for all. They said goodbye to the policy of one country, two systems. It did not do so, as some expected, through a shocking occupation of troops or military force, but rather by way of a grey vote in the National People's Congress Standing Committee, which is the Parliament of China. That vote ratified the entry into force of a new security law in the former British colony. Dear friends, we are talking about a new law that, in practice, has put an end to freedom of speech, demonstration, and political association, among other things. These were previously held rights that had made Hong Kong one of the freest territories on the planet for decades. As a result, from the 1st of July, any social media platform, traditional media agency, publishing company, or educational center has been in the spotlight of the Chinese dictatorship. To give you an idea, with this law, which will be applied by courts and special security forces and controlled directly by Beijing, any action that the Chinese regime considers to promote sedition, subversion, separatism, or collusion with foreign forces could end in harsh prison terms and even life imprisonment. Friends, the security law is a blank check for the Chinese government to pursue any person or movement in Hong Kong that is inconvenient for them. And as you can imagine, China hasn't held back in using this law. Repression and fear are two factors that have now become part of everyday life in this South China Sea enclave. The new policy of both Beijing and the local authorities is to crack down firmly on any show of dissent. Wait a minute, you don't believe me? Do you really think I'm exaggerating? Well, pay attention to the kind of headlines that have become commonplace in Hong Kong these days.
Hong Kong's Joshua Wong and Agnes Chow jailed for protest roles. Democracy activists face months behind bars with more charges pending. Asia Nikkei Review. 7 pro-democratic lawmakers arrested in Hong Kong. Asia Nikkei Review. You used to see books critical of the authorities in Hong Kong. Such books are now no longer seen in the bookstores. Yuri Suzuki, senior partner at law firm Atsumi & Sakai. The last time I saw many of my social media friends online was June 30th, the day Beijing passed a national security law for Hong Kong. My friend list has shortened, and some reappeared with names that I did not recognize. Many removed their accounts out of fear that they may be pursued for even the smallest slight against the government. Nicole Liu, FT reporter.
Friends, since the start of the mass protests in 2019, almost 10,000 people have been arrested and thousands prosecuted. However, since the new national security law went into effect, things have gotten much worse. To give you an idea, since the new law came into effect, dozens of key pro-democracy figures have been arrested, including several legislators. In August, the police raided the offices of Apple Daily, one of the few media outlets not controlled by Beijing. Jimmy Lai, the newspaper's founder, along with 8 others, including 2 of his sons, were arrested under the new security law. And on the 2nd of December, authorities denied Jimmy Lai even provisional freedom. On the 3rd of September, 12 pro-democracy activists were captured by the Chinese Coast Guard, whilst attempting a dramatic boat escape to Taiwan. The youngest was only 16 years old. And friends, these are just 3 examples of what the new normality is for Hong Kongers. But wait a moment, because this is not the end of it. On the 12th of November, the Chinese authorities gave a new turn of the screw to this whole affair. They authorized the Hong Kong government to permanently expel any legislator, i.e. any member of parliament who is not considered sufficiently patriotic. And most strikingly, this expulsion order does not have to go through the local courts. In other words, now the executive authority of Hong Kong, which is elected by the Chinese government, and which is currently led by Ms. Carrie Lam, can expel from the Hong Kong parliament any MPs that are inconvenient to them, all with complete impunity and without any judicial backing. So just minutes after this new rule went into effect, 4 members of the opposition were expelled from parliament. In other words, there is no longer any room for the opposition in the Hong Kong parliament.
The government can now remove any face it wants from the parliament. There will be no future for this legislature. Kenneth Leung, one of the expelled MPs.
To top it all off, in her last annual policy speech, Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam called the security law remarkably effective and pledged to promote patriotic education. You can imagine what that means. But all this, my friends, is something that we have talked more or less about already, and I am very sure that very few of you will find it strange. But the real questions are, what are the consequences of this political interference? What are the strengths of this increasingly less autonomous region? And the most important question of all, what does China expect to need from Hong Kong? Listen up.
The Wall Street of Asia.
Friends, the former British colony became an important enclave during the 20th century, not only a commercial one, but above all, a financial one. Its legal system, inspired by the British model, which gave a lot of legal security, enormous freedom of movement for people, capital and goods, low taxes, and English as the working language, were just some of the elements that catapulted it to the top of the international financial rankings. But that's not all. The spectacular takeoff of the Chinese economy over the past decades, you'll soon see why, has made Hong Kong the world's most important international financial center, just behind New York and London. In 2019, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange was the one that raised the most money with new market outlets. It was placed above both the Nasdaq and the New York Stock Exchange. In 2020, things are not much different. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange and the Nasdaq compete hand in hand for the symbolic first position. And there's a good reason for all of this. As you all know, Hong Kong has been a part of China since 1997. However, as you also know, its international status has been an independent country in practice. For example, the 1992 Hong Kong Policy Act of the United States made this territory a separate customs area from mainland China for all the years since the act and guaranteed currency convertibility. And this is not the only regulation that exists. Many agreements have shaped Hong Kong. For example, the SEC, the Wall Street Securities Supervisor, has an enforcement agreement with its Hong Kong counterpart. Many regulations are similar, and its financial derivatives companies are treated by US agencies virtually as if they were local companies. In fact, most banking and financial supervisors around the world treat Hong Kong institutions almost as if they were based in Frankfurt itself. All this has created a unique and highly competitive ecosystem. Perhaps the most important feature, however, is that it is the most prominent dollar funding center in all of Asia. Since 1983, its currency, the Hong Kong dollar, has been pegged to the US dollar, a bond backed by reserves of more than $400 billion. Put another way, if you want or need dollars in Asia, Hong Kong is your go-to place. Well, it is all the characteristics that we have mentioned that explain why this small enclave is such a bustling place, especially if we're talking about money. With just over 7.5 million inhabitants, 163 different banks, most of them international, are established in Hong Kong. Of course, practically all the large entities in the world have operations in this place. 13% of all employment and 26% of its economy comes from the financial industry. Now, having said that, there are some essential questions that we have to answer. What role does Hong Kong play for China? How important is the city for the economy of the Asian giant? And take note, because these two questions may have much more important implications than you can imagine. Listen up.
How much does China need Hong Kong?
Friends, it appears that the importance that Hong Kong has in the Chinese economy has been reduced a lot over the last 3 decades. After all, if in 1993, Hong Kong represented 27% of all China's GDP, today that figure is less than 3%. In fact, in 2019, the GDP of Shenzhen province exceeded that of Hong Kong. However, hold on a moment, because the influence, the significance of this special administrative region manifests itself in a very different way. While Hong Kong is becoming more and more Chinese, its institutions have so far been left virtually equivalent to those of a Western economy. I'm referring to examples of the courts, the regulators, and the monetary authority. All of these institutions have been functioning independently and effectively for decades. And it's not just about public institutions. This city is also full as a city like London is, of all kinds of professionals linked to the financial world who are highly specialized, from law firms to asset managers, analysts, and fintech technologies. Thanks precisely to this, Hong Kong has become something like a bridge between two very different worlds. On the one hand, the Western world, and on the other, the prosperous world of the new China. While the Western financial system is categorized by free capital flows, free dissemination of information, and legal security, things are quite different still in China. The controls on capital movements are still enormous, while, well, let's say that China is not famous for its legal security. Just like any other dictatorship, really. The fact is that, precisely because of these differences, Hong Kong plays a double role. On the one hand, it is the main gateway to mainland China for foreign investment, and on the other hand, it is the place where Chinese companies, including the big public companies, raise funds, particularly, of course, in US dollars. Remember that to conduct international operations, having the dollar bills of the American empire is almost indispensable. Well, in the same way, if you are looking for yuan to invest in China and you want to be able to change them with some freedom and have guarantees and legal security, Hong Kong exactly the door that you have to knock on. Because friends, this city is not only the most important dollar financing center in Asia, it is also the largest market for yuan outside mainland China in the world. Thus, central Hong Kong's financial district is the place where entrepreneurs and technology leaders in China make agreements with US hedge funds to raise financing, while at the same time, the large public banks in China issue bonds to finance new projects, such as the New Silk Road. It is also the place where dozens and dozens of Chinese companies are listed, including 421 companies controlled by the Chinese government itself. At the end of the day, being listed in Hong Kong means opening the door to investors and capital from all over the world. To give you an idea of the almost $75 billion that Chinese companies raised on stock exchanges during 2019, about half came from this city. And this also explains why more than 70% of the total capitalization in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange corresponds to Chinese companies. And while the Chinese use this market to collect many savings, and Chinese companies use it to attract money, investments, and partners, as well as to finance their projects abroad, international investors also use it as a gateway to the Chinese giant. According to data from Morgan Stanley, in 2018, for example, more than 60% of foreign direct investment in the Asian giant was channeled from here, from this city, from Central, from the financial district of Hong Kong. More than 60%. So you see, in a way, Hong Kong is still indispensable to China. Let's just say that eroding financial strength could lead to many problems for Beijing. But hang on a moment, that could happen with everything we told you at the beginning of the video, couldn't it? Check it out.
From global city to Chinese fort.
Friends, could a Hong Kong financial analyst question a large public company under the new rules? Could investors trust the courts if they are confronted with someone close to the Chinese Communist Party? Could economic information or analysis critical of the government be prosecuted? Could China make it harder to get free access to the web in Hong Kong if it did get prosecuted? Will senior professionals feel comfortable about accepting less freedom of speech? What will happen to savings in the face of reduced legal security? Be careful, friends. These are not minor questions. This is the new scenario Hong Kong is facing, and particularly so in its famous financial center. For example, according to some surveys published after the security law was announced, many companies, most of them, believe that this new law would affect them negatively. A survey conducted in early August by the American Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong found that 75% of respondents were pessimistic about the business prospects in the city, and nearly 40% planned to move their capital, operations, or assets elsewhere. Look at what happened with Ant Financial, for example. On 5th of November 2020, this company, which is something like the financial subsidiary of Alibaba, was due to start trading on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. It was the biggest IPO in the history of the planet. However, a few days prior, in late October, its founder, Jack Ma, was critical of the Chinese government at a financial forum in Shanghai. Well, do you know what happened? Overnight, the Chinese government suspended the IPO of this giant, valued at hundreds of billions of US dollars. According to speculation, it was Xi Jinping himself who made the decision. And of course, that doesn't seem like the best way to win the trust of investors or to show that things in the new Hong Kong are going to run smoothly now, does it? Friends, the future of Hong Kong, particularly its position as an international financial center, is far from clear. Everything indicates that it will gradually become more Chinese and less international.
I don't know what the future of Hong Kong is going to be, but I'm pretty sure it won't be a global financial center. Hong Kong is now the financial center of China, which is somewhat different. Alicia Garcia Herrero, chief economist for the Asia Pacific at Netaxis.
But of course, even if this were the case, it would still be bad for China. It would weaken its financial connection with the rest of the world. It could reduce the number of investments secured, limit access to dollars, and increase the cost of capital for its companies. That is the great risk that the Chinese government now faces, although they publicly express a somewhat different idea.
What China, Hong Kong, and the international community need most from Hong Kong is stability and a return to order. If law and order can be maintained, there will be great interest around the world in continuing to invest in this region, as investors seek rapid growth and quick returns. Wang Huiyao, advisor to the Chinese central government and president of the Center for China and Globalization.
You see, in Beijing, they believe that by keeping things calm, Hong Kong will not suffer, or at least it won't suffer much, which may or may not be true. In any case, that's the way things are, and the question that comes up is there a plan B? Yes, there is, but that has a lot to do with Macau, but that's a topic for a future video here on VisualPolitik. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on that platform. Please consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.